So, the US Pentagon is claiming that as of April 12th, which is as of more than 1 week before I am recording this video, its Javelin anti-tank missiles have destroyed more than 1,300 Russian tanks and armored vehicles. Now, do I need to explain that this is a blatant lie, that the US Pentagon is once again lying through its teeth, and that the numbers that they are throwing around are so over the top and so absurd that if they had any credence to them whatsoever, then the situation on the ground in Ukraine would not resemble anything like what it is today. The utter smooth brains that work for Western mainstream media are writing articles by the dozens and by the hundreds which say, with a completely straight face, that Russia has lost so many tanks in Ukraine that it signals the end of the tank. That is to say, that tanks are now obsolete, since they can be destroyed by javelins and switchblade loitering munitions. Now, the big problem with all of this, which none of the so-called journalists that work for Western mainstream media seem to be able to notice, is that the Pentagon claim of over 1,300 destroyed Russian tanks and armored vehicles is absurd and stupid beyond words if taken at face value. You understand how many tanks that is, even if we include armored vehicles in that figure. Russia only has about 2,500 tanks in active service and about 4,000 to 5,000 infantry fighting vehicles. Now, of course, not nearly all of these are in Ukraine. Russia has vast borders, which it has to protect with its tanks. It has a huge permanent military garrison in Kaliningrad. It has bases in Central Asian countries, in the Caucasus. It's fighting a war in Syria. It has tanks in Belarus and in Russia's western and southern military districts, which are being held in reserve. They're not being sent to the front lines in Ukraine. If 1,300 Russian armored vehicles were really destroyed by Javelin missiles, Russia would hardly have any tanks or armored fighting vehicles left. And I say this because the West has also delivered plenty of other very modern anti-tank weapons to Ukraine, which are not Javelin missiles. Only about 7,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles were delivered to Ukraine, compared to a total figure of 65,000 total anti-tank weapons. And I presume that the Pentagon isn't going to claim that only Javelin missiles have destroyed Russian tanks, whereas the other 58,000 anti-tank weapons that were delivered to Ukraine have done diddly squat. So if all of these weapons, or even just the Javelin missiles, were even 1/10 as effective as the Pentagon claims them to be, entire Russian brigades would be without any meaningful amounts of armor right now. Russia would be pulling out various Soviet T-62s from out of storage. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe that Russia has suffered such high armor losses that its brigades are without armor, that its various tank brigades have de facto become infantry brigades. And if I am wrong about this, please do let me know. Tell me the name and the number of the Russian brigade which has been destroyed, which has ceased to exist. Any one such brigade in Ukraine. If something like this happened on an organizational level, it would be major news that would be impossible to hide. Now, I haven't heard of anything remotely like this happen. Here is another interesting figure to note. The United States claims that out of 300 Javelin missiles that were fired by Ukrainian forces, 280 scored hits on Russian armored vehicles and destroyed them, which leads to a shot-to-kill ratio that is well over 90%. Now, if we take this figure literally and we consider the fact that 7,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles have been already delivered to Ukraine, with more on the way, and we also consider the ridiculous numbers of other anti-tank missiles that were delivered by other Western countries, then Russia should soon have no armor left. Russia should have no tanks left no infantry fighting vehicles left, no BTRs left. And of course, if this doesn't happen, then we have even more definitive proof that the Pentagon is once again bullshitting through its teeth. Just like it once bullshat about there being weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. How do people not realize that when it comes to claims like these, there is a conflict of interest, that the Pentagon is, in this case, trying to smear the Russian military and to hype up its own weaponry so that they can sell more of it to other countries? Why do people seriously believe, even for a second, sources that have both a long history of lying and have a vested interest in peddling yet more blatant lies? And honestly, I have to rant about this for a minute because I am sick over my neck with this bullcrap. It never ceases to amaze me how much people seriously believe Western media, given that it's being caught peddling the most absurd, fantastical lies time and time again. I have said this several times before. I am not a military expert. I have an amateur interest in various things military. But one does not need to be an expert to realize that they are being fed this utter bullshit. One only needs 2 brain cells that they can rub together and a little bit of critical thinking. And anyone who has these ingredients would have realized that the story of there being weapons of mass destruction in Iraq is utter BS, that the story of Russia hacking American elections is utter crap, that the constant stream of claims that Western governments put out about their geopolitical rivals using chemical weapons left, right, and center is blatantly false. And here I have to say that once again, the story of the Novichok nerve agent, which is a weapon of mass destruction, allegedly 10 times deadlier than VX gas, something which a tablespoon of would kill thousands of people if let loose in an enclosed area, in which the mainstream story goes that Russia is actively using this poison to try and kill its political dissidents and to try and kill some British citizens, and hasn't actually succeeded in killing any of them. And of course, the latest blatant fiction of there being a massacre in a certain town near the city of Kiev, where Russian soldiers allegedly just woke up on the wrong side of the bed one morning and decided to randomly kill over 500 civilians, and that very conveniently this was only noticed one day after Ukrainian soldiers entered the city. Not on the same day, but one day after, even as we are being told that these bodies had been lying around for weeks and nobody bothered to clear them out of the streets. All of these lies, and many, many other ones, by the way, blatant lies, which so many people, time and time again, eat up like it's the latest flavor of Kool-Aid Jello. It is shocking to see. So, with this latest rant on the utter bullshit that is being fed to us by Western media and by the US Pentagon out of the way, I now want to talk a little bit about the Javelin missile system in general. Now, make no mistake, just because I'm calling out the Pentagon for their utterly moronic lies doesn't mean that the Javelin isn't a good anti-tank missile or an effective weapon. And by the way, the same applies to the respective anti-tank missiles that other countries have delivered to Ukraine. They are not ineffective weapons. I am here to tell everybody that all of these weapon systems are not magic Wunderwaffes that you can point in the general direction of an enemy tank and ensure a kill with a 90-95% probability. I am not going to delve too deep into how anti-tank missiles work or how the Javelin missile system in particular works. That would simply make this video a lot longer than I would like it to be, and frankly, I don't feel like I have enough expertise to provide a wealth of accurate information on the subject. Suffice it to say that the Javelin missile works much like any other missile-based anti-tank weapon. It uses a shaped charge warhead. Upon striking a target, this kind of warhead releases a high-velocity jet which melts through armor. This is not a new concept. These types of warheads have been around since the Second World War. So there is nothing that is principally better in the Javelin missile system than for any other anti-tank weapon. At least nothing that would make it a Wunderwaffe compared to other modern weapons of its class. The Javelin missile famously has a top attack mode, where the missile flies above the tank and, as it approaches the tank, it descends to strike the tank at a roughly 45-degree angle. Of course, the roof of a tank is much less armored than its front, and the high-velocity jet, which the warhead releases, can usually cut straight through this part of the tank's armor. But that doesn't make the Javelin missile some kind of Wunderwaffe. What the Russians basically did to protect against this is weld these additional roofs on top of their tanks so that the missile, upon striking this second roof, would detonate its warhead, and the resulting high-velocity stream would have to travel through an additional meter of air before coming into contact with the tank's armor. This, of course, greatly reduces the armor penetration capability of the high-velocity jet that is released by the warhead. Of course, this isn't a guaranteed defense, not to mention that not nearly all tanks have these additional roofs installed on their turrets. But in any scenario, it provides a tank with another layer of defense against top attack missiles, in addition to the explosive reactive armor that has been used on tanks for many decades now. And one last thing that I want to show you to verifiably debunk this ridiculous myth of Javelin missiles and British NLAW missiles killing Russian tanks left, right, and center is a few images and videos that demonstrate how well these weapon systems work in practice. This video was taken in Mariupol. We see a Ukrainian soldier firing a missile at a tank's roof. And the missile not only fails to destroy the tank, but it even fails to significantly damage it. Honestly, this is a very lucky situation for the Russian tank, since the missile most likely hit an ERA block, and there is speculation on the internet that the missile's warhead may not have detonated correctly, or that it didn't travel far enough to arm itself. But at the end of the day, it still failed to defeat one of Russia's oldest tanks. This is a T-72B3 model 1989 tank. It is a Soviet tank. And here we see more videos of the fighting in Mariupol, once again featuring a T-72 tank, which in any modification is one of the older and less effective Russian tanks out there. And this tank, after taking a missile hit to the side, is not put out of action. Only after the second missile hit is it seriously damaged. And even after the third missile hit, the crew manages to get out alive and unharmed. So these missiles can definitely kill a tank. And make no mistake, there is a good probability that they will disable or destroy a tank on the first hit, but that probability is nowhere near 100%, even for the oldest tanks that are in service with the Russian military. Here is another photo that made its rounds around the Russian internet. This is another Russian T-72 tank after surviving 3 direct hits from various Javelin and NLAW missiles. The tank is clearly damaged, but it's not disabled. And one very last thing that I will say is that even if these anti-tank weapons were destroying every single Russian tank from the first hit, they still wouldn't be Wunderwaffes that make tanks obsolete. Once again, I don't want to go too deep into the specifics of how these weapon systems work, especially on the battlefield, but suffice it to say that as an anti-tank weapons operator, you will rarely find yourself in a position to fire an anti-tank missile from a safe location at an enemy tank. These stories of Javelin and NLAW missile operators sitting in a corner somewhere killing 50, 60, 100 Russian tanks is utter blatant bullshit. So I hope that in this video I have unveiled a bit of the bullshit that the US Pentagon and Western mainstream media is spreading around concerning the effectiveness of anti-tank weapons, sky-high Russian losses, and the imminent collapse of the Russian army. Again, not arguing this from any position of authority. I'm not saying that I'm some sort of military expert. All I'm saying is that I have two brain cells to put together and notice that the stories that we're being fed are not logically coherent. With that said, I hope that you enjoyed this video/rant. If you did like this video, please be sure to click on the like button, especially on YouTube, since it helps make the video more popular via the algorithm and will ensure that more people will see it. And also, please be sure to check out my channels on Rumble and on Telegram. The links to both will be in the video description. Both of these are completely free platforms that have no political censorship whatsoever. And if you are watching this on Rumble, then the link in the description will be to my YouTube channel. Please be sure to check that out as well. With that said, I thank you for watching this video and wish you all the best.